this. We pass a lot of crazy bills around here. This bill is 2 pages. S 2280, here it is. This is the first page. This is the second page. Everybody in America can read it. I would strongly recommend those of you listening get out and read the bill. It literally will take you like 15 seconds. It's so simple. And Senator Hoeven and I wrote it to be simple. As I've said before, we wrote it to go the distance. We wrote it to go the distance. It is not complicated. It simply says this: after waiting 5 years and after acknowledging all environmental studies have been done, all economic studies have been done, we direct the President of the United States to give his approval. We're not circumventing him. Every report he's requested has been turned into him. Every single solitary one. And in addition, Madam President, you know this, at your request and Senator Tester's request, Senator Hoeven and I added this language: private property savings clause. Nothing in this act alters any federal, state, or local process or condition in effect on the date of enactment of this act that is necessary to secure access from an owner of private property to construct the pipeline and cross-border facilities. In other words, this language says all private property rights will be honored. That was not in the House bill. But Senator Hoeven and I put it in this bill because we wanted to put that debate to an end. All private property rights are honored. The environmental studies have been completely completed. And also in our bill is respect for Nebraska, because we're not trying to run over Nebraska. We say here, and I'll point it out in just a minute, that subject to the final decision by Nebraska about where this is going to go, Nebraska can decide. I ask unanimous consent for 2 more minutes.
Without objection.
As you can see, all the other states have said fine to their line. Nebraska has to decide. That's in the court. This bill says that they can still decide this. This doesn't tell Nebraska where to build it. So I hope that people that come to the floor to talk about this pipeline will bring their facts and not fear. Facts, not fear. Now, I am a fierce proponent of the pipeline, and there are fierce opponents, and I respect them. And there are 2 people I greatly respect, Barbara Boxer and Ben Cardin. But we are on the exact opposite side of this issue. So let's discuss facts. And let me say one thing about the, then let me just say one more thing, and then I'll give this to Senator Barrasso, because this is more personal. I was very disappointed in the senator from Kansas when he came down and said something like he finds it strange, or I think his words were, he's kind of bemused that we would be debating this because he thinks that this is some kind of political opportunity. You know, I have a lot of respect for the senator from Kansas. I worked with him as I was his chair and he was my ranking member and he was my chair on emerging threats. We've been through some pretty tough meetings together. When this country was under attack in 9/11, he was the chair, I was the chair of emerging threats, and he was the ranking member when the Twin Towers burned. So he's a Marine. I always joked, he's a Marine and I'm a Girl Scout, so I think he kind of has one up on me. But nonetheless, both have a pretty good code of honor. And for him to come to the floor after being in the foxhole with me on that day and to say that he thinks that this is some kind of convenient opportunity for me is really beneath the dignity of himself, the Marine Corps, and the state that he represents. This is a serious issue. We should have debated it months ago, and the only reason we didn't, and Harry Reid's on the floor here, he's heard me say this to him in private, and I will say it in public, is because neither leader could get their caucuses in a position to have this debate. And there are many reasons for it. But those reasons cleared up after this election. And that's why we're having this debate, because I asked for it, and I appreciate the members, no matter how they vote, having a debate. Because if we had more debates like this in America, people might be hopeful that we could get something done. And I yield the floor to the senator from Wyoming.
Madam President,
The Majority Leader.
I'm going to use leader time and won't interfere with any of the time that's been allocated to these gentlemen and ladies. Mr. President, Madam President, in faraway Israel, during morning prayer, a horrific attack took place. A number of people were having their morning prayer. 4 rabbis were savagely beaten, hacked to death with a meat cleaver. 2 Palestinian men entered a synagogue in Jerusalem and savagely murdered these 4 rabbis in the midst of morning prayer. 3 of these victims were American citizens. The other, I'm told, was a British citizen. One of them was a leading scholar, a Hasidic scholar. But, Madam President, more than a dozen others were hacked with a meat cleaver while they're there praying. A number of these people are in critical condition as we speak. Secretary of State John Kerry today said, and I quote, "Innocent people who have come to worship died in a sanctuary of a synagogue," close quote. Madam President, places of worship have always been a refuge in times of peace and in times of conflict. Yet these terrorists hacked and brutally, mercilessly murdered worshipers in the midst of a prayer. This is not an isolated incident. Recently, Palestinian terrorists have carried out shocking attacks all across Israel. 7 Israelis have been killed in these horrible attacks, including a 3-month-old American infant, a baby, 3 months old, an Israeli soldier, border patrol officer. These attacks are a direct result of incitement, and I call upon the Palestinian leadership to condemn these attacks unequivocally. This butchery has no place in the modern world, and they should stop it.
Senator from California.
Madam President, I want to thank the Majority Leader Reid for his remarks. Sometimes it really does feel that the world is falling apart, and we have to speak out as we are doing every time these terrorists rear their head. So I know we have some time over here by Senator Barrasso. I just wanted to make a point on the environmental impact statement. It's hard to get back. But as I understand it, in the Hoeven-Landrieu bill, the EIS is approved. And so if the Nebraska bureaucracy determines that there's a new route, and I think this is what my friend from Maryland was getting at, it doesn't matter what the new route is, the EIS is deemed approved. And I just have to say, I don't think that's right, because I think that the people who live along that new route have a right to have a new EIS if, in fact, now the pipeline is being moved in a different direction. So I understand that the bill calls for property rights to be respected, and that's called eminent domain. And I know a lot of my friends on the other side hate eminent domain usually, but now they're embracing it because that's what's in your bill. But the fact of the matter is, if, as a result of a court case brought by property owners, the route changes, it is our council's understanding that the EIS is still automatically approved. So I wanted to get that on the record because my friend was, in fact, questioned, and I think he was right. And I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I come to the floor today to express my support for the approval of the Keystone XL Pipeline. This is bipartisan legislation. The House passed this bill with 31 Democrats voting for it. Last week, Senate Republicans welcomed the news that the outgoing Senate Majority Leader had finally decided to let the Senate vote on this legislation, and the vote is finally going to take place today. For years, House and Senate Republicans have been pushing legislation to approve the Keystone XL Pipeline. But until now, the outgoing Senate Majority Leader wouldn't even let the Senate vote on this measure. And it was all part of the Majority Leader's efforts to protect the President and the President's agenda. The Majority Leader had hoped that the American people would forget about the Senate. He had hoped that they'd be satisfied with President Obama's job approval. Well, 2 weeks ago, the American people made it clear that they have not forgotten about the Senate. The American people made it clear that they are not satisfied with President Obama and his policies. Instead, the American people want the President to work with the Senate to enact bipartisan legislation to grow our economy,